When we think of Henry VIII, we often picture the larger-than-life king with 6 wives, a powerful court, and a reign that changed England forever. But Henry's story did not begin on the throne. In fact, he wasn't even meant to be king. The path that led Henry to power was shaped by the lives, and often the deaths, of his siblings. To truly understand how Henry VIII became the monarch we know today, we must return to a time when England was still emerging from the shadows of war. For decades, England had been torn apart by the Wars of the Roses, a brutal conflict between the rival houses of Lancaster and York. Henry VIII's father, Henry VII, emerged victorious at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, defeating Richard III and seizing the throne. To secure his claim, Henry VII married Elizabeth of York, uniting the Red Rose of Lancaster and the White Rose of York into the new Tudor dynasty. Their union brought a fragile peace, but everyone knew it could be shattered at any moment. For this new royal line to survive, Henry VII and Elizabeth needed one thing above all else: heirs. Between 1486 and 1503, Henry VII and Elizabeth of York welcomed 7 children into the world: Arthur Tudor, Margaret Tudor, Henry Tudor, Elizabeth Tudor, Mary Tudor, Edmund Tudor, and Katherine Tudor. But in a world plagued by high infant mortality, only 3 of those children would survive to adulthood. From the very beginning, it was Arthur who carried the hopes of the Tudor dynasty. Even his name was chosen with care. Henry VII wanted to link his new rule to the legendary King Arthur, giving his line a sense of destiny and ancient right to rule. Arthur was raised as a future king from the moment he could walk. While young Henry was free to enjoy a childhood filled with music, hunting, and play, Arthur's upbringing was strict and purposeful. He was educated in politics, languages, and diplomacy, carefully prepared for the immense responsibility he would one day inherit. At just 15 years old, Arthur was sent to Ludlow Castle to preside over his own court as Prince of Wales, a rehearsal for kingship. To further secure England's place on the world stage, Henry VII arranged a magnificent marriage for his heir. Arthur would wed Catherine of Aragon, the daughter of Spain's powerful monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella. Their wedding in November 1501 was one of the grandest celebrations England had ever seen, filled with pageantry and hope for the future. For a moment it seemed the Tudor dynasty was secure, its future shining brightly. But just a few months later, tragedy struck. Arthur fell gravely ill, possibly with the mysterious and deadly sweating sickness that plagued Tudor England. On April 2, 1502, he died at just 15 years old. Arthur's sudden death sent shockwaves through the kingdom. For his parents, it was a devastating personal loss. For England, it was a political disaster. The boy who had been groomed for the throne was gone, and with him, the certainty of the dynasty's future. Overnight, the focus shifted to his younger brother, Henry. At only 10 years old, Henry became heir to the throne, a role for which he was utterly unprepared. This single moment changed the course of history. While Arthur's life ended in tragedy, Henry's older sister Margaret was embarking on a path that would change the very map of Britain. Born in 1489, Margaret was married at the age of 13 to James IV of Scotland in a carefully crafted alliance meant to bring peace between England and Scotland, 2 nations that had long been bitter enemies. As a young bride, Margaret traveled north to a foreign court, her future tied to the hope of unity. She gave birth to several children, though only one son, James, survived infancy. When her husband was killed in battle at Flodden Field in 1513, Margaret found herself a widow and the regent of Scotland, ruling on behalf of her young son, James V. Her position was precarious. Many Scottish nobles distrusted her because of her English birth, while her own brother, Henry VIII, often meddled in Scottish affairs, creating tension and mistrust. Margaret's later marriages caused further scandal, undermining her authority. Yet despite these struggles, her lineage would prove vital. Her great-grandson, James VI of Scotland, would one day inherit the English throne after the death of Henry's daughter, Elizabeth I. In 1603, he united the crowns of England and Scotland under one ruler, fulfilling the promise of Margaret's marriage and forever altering the political landscape of the British Isles. What began as a teenage girls' political union would ultimately create the framework for the United Kingdom itself. Mary Tudor, the next surviving sibling, could not have been more different from Margaret. Where Margaret's life was shaped by duty, Mary's was defined by passion and defiance. Born in March 1496, Mary was renowned for her stunning beauty and charm. At 18, she was married to King Louis XII of France, a man more than 3 decades her senior. The match was purely political, designed to strengthen England's ties with France. Mary played her role with grace, but she had no love for her elderly husband. Fate intervened swiftly. Just 3 months after the wedding, Louis died, leaving Mary a teenage widow in a foreign court. But Mary had a plan. Before leaving for France, she had extracted a promise from her brother Henry VIII. If she survived this marriage, she would be allowed to choose her next husband. True to her word, she defied expectations and secretly married Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, Henry's closest friend and one of the most powerful men in England. When news of the secret wedding reached Henry, he was furious. Royal marriages were matters of state, not personal choice. Yet, despite his anger, he eventually forgave the couple, though not without exacting heavy fines and public displays of submission. Mary and Charles went on to have children, including Frances Brandon, whose daughter would become the tragic Lady Jane Grey, remembered as England's 9 Days Queen. Mary's bold rebellion against royal duty set a precedent for future conflicts and entangled her descendants in the deadly politics of succession. Between Margaret and Mary, there was another daughter, Elizabeth Tudor, born in July 1492. She was healthy and lively, a symbol of hope for her parents and the realm. But Elizabeth became the first of the Tudor children to die. On the 14th of September, 1495, while staying at Eltham Palace, she died unexpectedly at the age of 3 years, 2 months, and 12 days. At the time of her death, her parents were traveling between Northampton and Banbury. When they received the devastating news, they were overwhelmed with sorrow. Elizabeth's small body was laid to rest with care and reverence. She was buried in Westminster Abbey, where her tomb remains to this day. February 1499, Elizabeth of York gave birth to another son, Prince Edmund Tudor, named after Henry VII's own father, Edmund Tudor, the first Earl of Richmond. His birth at Greenwich Palace was celebrated with grandeur. The Tudor dynasty seemed especially secure, with 3 healthy boys. He was given the title Duke of Somerset. For a short time, Edmund seemed to thrive. He spent his early months in the royal nursery at Eltham Palace, surrounded by his siblings, including Margaret, Mary, and his brother Henry. But fate struck again. On the 19th of June 1500, Edmund died unexpectedly at Hatfield House in Hertfordshire, just 15 months old. The cause of his death remains unknown. His passing was yet another devastating blow to the family. The final child, Katherine Tudor, was born in February 1503. The Queen's health had been weakened by so many pregnancies, and Catherine's birth was difficult. The baby survived only a few days, and Queen Elizabeth herself died soon afterward from complications of childbirth. The double tragedy devastated Henry VII, who never remarried and spent the remainder of his life in mourning. These final losses marked the end of Elizabeth of York's role in shaping the dynasty and left the surviving Tudor children to grow up in a court marked by sorrow and instability. By the time Henry VIII ascended the throne in 1509, most of his siblings were gone. Only Margaret and Mary remained alive. The legacy of Henry's siblings can be traced long after their lifetimes. Arthur's widow, Catherine of Aragon, became Henry's first queen and the catalyst for the English Reformation. Margaret's descendants would unite 2 kingdoms under one crown, shaping the modern United Kingdom. Mary's descendants would be caught in the violent struggle for power, culminating in the tragedy of Lady Jane Grey. Even the brief lives of Elizabeth, Edmund, and Catherine influenced history by shaping Henry's fears, his ambitions, and his most consequential decisions as king. He had witnessed firsthand how fragile the royal line could be, and this fear fueled his relentless obsession with producing a male heir. It was this obsession that would drive so many of the dramatic events of his reign, from his multiple marriages to his break with the Catholic Church.